It's time for Off the Record, On the Rocks. Each episode, Michael Toner and Ankarina Lara break down the latest news on all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto, filtering out noise and connecting dots as we pour ourselves into the future.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another Off the Record, On the Rocks with my good friend, Mr. Ankarina Lara. How are you doing, sir?
It's October. The seasons are changing in Los Angeles. Congress is grilling heads of regulatory agencies. It feels like we're going to see some action, a lot of action between now and Thanksgiving. So I'm feeling good. How are you feeling?
I think that's a good assessment. It does. We talk about the months. We talk about the moon cycles. We got two full moons behind us. We knew it was going to be busy heading into October, but the first one off the top, I have to acknowledge my incorrect prediction. I was so certain that the government would actually shut down on September 30th at midnight. It looks like the government shutdown crisis was averted. Somehow these guys seem to have snuck in a Biden impeachment trial, and now we're taking SBF to court. It just feels like everybody, back to school starts in September, but it's like back to business in October. And we know we've got senators wanting to go talk to Xi Jinping in China. It's just a lot of stuff moving. Like, we're going to get a lot of clarity here, I think, in October. And then we'll see, does Gensler make it? Does he survive till Thanksgiving, or is he home for the holidays?
Or does his turkey get cooked and basted? And it's true, like, back to school September, everyone talks about Uptober, right? Isn't that the term all the crypto community uses for October? Because
always up.
Coins, I guess, historically surge. For, I guess, 8 or 9 of the last 11 years, crypto has been up in October, so it's called Uptober. But this is one of those Uptobers that's different, like you said. Like, the fact that we have a government shutdown averted, at what cost, right? Of kind of a phony impeachment attempt just to maybe placate somebody. But it kind of feels like McCarthy's going to get impeached by his own crew. And what happens when that happens? Does any of that mean anything? Or is it really just kind of a lot of a theater at this point? Because
I think it's a lot of theater happening. Honestly, I think it's a lot of theater happening. I think the the Biden impeachment inquiry had to have in some way, shape, or form, McCarthy thought he was going to get a favor out of it, from the Matt Gaetz of the world. And I think that has now failed. And now Matt Gaetz is now coming back and saying, I'm going to call for your head, for ousting you here. And I think that was the deal they originally made when they put McCarthy in the spot, was that any one person could call for a replacement of the speaker. Sounds like that's what Matt's going to do. And at the end of the day, it's also a short-term stopgap. So we kind of have to talk about that. So maybe my prediction wasn't completely wrong, because maybe they're buying time to get to what will end up being some sort of full stop. I don't know.
I mean, the timing, of course, gets us right to Thanksgiving, which is also sort of, I think, an important detail. So we talk about basting turkeys and cooking them. The timing could work, but the one that popped for me in the whole global scene is this, taking us back to one of our first episodes. I want to say it was one of the first 5 episodes from years ago. You and I ruminated on blockchain as a technology and what could it be used for, because we at that time even said clearly altcoins and NFTs and rug pull after rug pull is not the future of the blockchain, right? It's something else. And we talked about, what we have is Charles Hoskinson and the Cardano project that's supposedly going to help African nations bring educational records on the blockchain so people can go get jobs, or it's identification for driving your car. And we thought about ourselves, like the US. We had this migrant crisis at the border. We use the blockchain to figure out a way to identify people, et cetera. And guess what happens? What hits the news? Just sort of, as soon as the government goes back to work in Q4, Brazil just comes ripping out of the gate saying, hey, we have 214 million citizens, and we're putting them all on the blockchain, all their identities.
Yeah, this is
shocker.
Wild. We talked about it, though, and I'll take us through from what we're seeing happening in the congressional landscape around crypto, and what's happening today around this SBF trial. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'll get to the education here and what this means in Brazil and what you and I are talking about. But I was watching the news this afternoon, and they're covering everything around SBF. But the thing that I noticed was that all of the reporters were taking this educational approach. They were explaining to me, the retail investor, watching Bloomberg on my lunch break, what was happening with crypto and how blockchain technology works. And we did talk about the use of blockchain technology for cross-border, for migrants to keep track of, identities and citizens and how folks are moving and how much money they have and are they surviving and are they paying their taxes and how is the government funding those things. So I think we can talk more about that education push that I see coming from the Coinbase of the world, from the crypto.coms of the world, and hell, even SBF in his trial, fury here is still going to be contributing to this educational landscape with retail investors. And what does that mean? What does that have to do with Brazil? Well, it's real world utility. It's more efficiency that this government thinks it can create, although really, really super sketchy. The announcement says that they're using this private blockchain developed by Serpro, Brazil's national data processing service, an internal, centralized, single point of failure, creating this private blockchain. So there are good things that people should understand about how blockchain and decentralized technologies can work. You also have to understand the potential pitfalls here. Does anybody in Brazil understand this might be putting a bit of a target on their back in terms of hacking?
It was a perfect segue to use the term target on their back, because I just look at it in like the juxtaposition of, say, another potential hack target. Let's rewind time. I want to say it was a long time ago, probably a decade ago. Target, the big box store, was hacked, and I want to say it was something like 30 or 40 or 50 million credit card account holders, and all their information was taken. 10 years ago, there's probably dark web people just sitting on that information, waiting to use it in 5 more years when you've forgotten about the fact that you were part of that hack, right? So then I look at Brazil. It's like, okay, Brazil is like 4 to 5 targets in terms of the size of the country, 214 million, not 50, right? And they even are so gully to use the word decentralized before they say private Serpro blockchain, which is literally an oxymoron. And this is where you talk about the education to the retail market. Does anyone in Brazil know that when something is private, it is most likely centralized? Or if it's private, it means that there is no transparency. there's so many different ways you could say that this is rife for some corruption. And my gosh, if you're a savvy enough hacker, and let's just say you're in on it. You work for Serpro, or Serpro, someone, and they talk loudly at a bar, and you get their passcode, some social hacking. Well, did you just hack an entire country? Is it that easy? Because I would have been like, hey man, don't put me on your government blockchain. That sounds like surveillance state 101. For me, that's a very strange move to just force everybody onto it.
I think
the benefits that you're describing maybe are going to outweigh those pains. So maybe there's benefits that I'm not seeing because I'm not a Brazilian. Whereas in the U.S., it just doesn't play the same way.
I think the opportunity here is for these companies who are taking somewhat centralized approaches, and I'll even lump Coinbase in there. Maybe an unpopular opinion there, but that's what they're doing. They're playing by the rules. They're centralizing it. They're acting as the surveillance partner for the U.S. federal government. Of course, they're going to play by the rules. They've also talked about taking an educational stance with their 535 program, going to all these congressional districts and teaching the retail investors. But
I haven't heard a lot about that recently, by the way.
I haven't, but I think that what you're talking about is kind of like what we need. And I think we're trying to do it here too, of educating. There's a lot of good things that can come, but you got to understand the potential pitfalls if it's a single point of failure. The FBX and SBF case, going to trial, I think is going to just continue highlighting all of the potential pitfalls, the things that, retail investors should be looking for in terms of common sense investing and using the tools and using the technologies. I mean, we've talked about on the show the concept of self-custody, you know, and having control over those assets. This is no joke. In the past week, I've had to wire money, and it took 7 days. You know, that old story of like the inefficiencies in the banking system, the inefficiencies in the migration or immigration system, the inefficiencies in our government budget process and averting government shutdowns. These blockchain technologies, when a regulatory framework comes to life, and now maybe that's our segue into Gensler's testimony and what the hell is going to happen with this regulatory framework. But and then I stumbled on this CFTC website that straight up says on CFTC.gov, in the US, I love how that's referenced, in the US, Bitcoin is a commodity. So this education around what is it? How do I invest in it? What are these ETFs? What is my risk factor if I'm buying it in an ETF versus my risk factor if I'm buying it on Coinbase or some other exchange? How do hard wallets work? All of that, I think there's so much work. While the big guys are coming in, we know the BlackRocks of the world are coming in. I think about my local, you know, financial investor down the street at Vanguard. When are they going to be talking to me about adding crypto into my portfolio, right? Along with my real estate and my stocks and my bonds, you know, when are they going to be getting to teaching the retail investor about these new asset classes?
Well, and the teaching you're describing too, the way you say it makes it sound like very benevolent, and that everyone is really working to like expose the truth, you know, to just put it simply. But I think you and I both know that this is the opportunity that the big, rich, highly connected institutional investment arms of every major bank and every major billionaire have an interest in changing the narrative. I mean, I'm not going to talk about stealing the narrative, because I feel like they already have it. They've stolen it, right? Like you said, they're going to educate us. They're going to tell us what we're supposed to know. Are they going to be able to do what Brazil did and basically make it seem like something that's blockchain, while centralized is actually decentralized? The retail, obviously, the SBF being in court, and then of course Gensler being on the stand in front of Congress. Those are probably the two that I look at in terms of where the most education is going to come. But then reading even in between those two lines, to take kind of two little notes that came out of it. At one point in the Gensler grilling, one of the senators asked very pointedly if he sold a Pokemon card, would it be a security?
Yeah, I didn't watch this. Tell me how it went.
It was really, really rich, because it was funny watching both Gary Gensler and the senator go back and forth saying the words Pokemon cards in Congress. And Gensler eventually says, no, if you buy a Pokemon card from me or you sell a Pokemon card, it's not a security, right? It's a Pokemon card. And then he says, okay, well, we've established that. But now I have a new thing for you. It's a tokenized Pokemon card. It's a Pokemon card that's now on a blockchain. And basically kind of got him into a corner where, of course, he didn't say that is a security. He has sort of this, bridging comment about how, well, we have to look at the details, blah, 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 blah.
Depends on who you bought it from, right?
Depends on who you buy it from.
Where'd you buy that Pokemon card from?
Yeah, and you can start going through this back and forth, but you can see the education that you're describing. I mean, you didn't watch the testimony, so that doesn't count, right? There's going to be some point where the CFTC website, the SEC website, some website, like you just called out, is just going to magically have a PDF that just appears there with no date on it. And there's just all this information about all these black and white details. And we saw it together. It just reads, Bitcoin is a commodity. I'm like, when was this published? You can't even find the date in the data of the file. It's so obfuscated.
This is really the truth. I'm prepping for the show. I'm looking at Gensler. I knew he did the testimony. I'm glad to hear he talked about Pokemon cards. That's hilarious. I do need to go back and watch this. I can't believe I missed it, actually. But yeah, I lost my train of thought. But I'm like, I can't believe these guys are up there, not answering the actual questions. Oh, then I go and Google. I'm like, okay, what's going on with the CFTC? And we called that here in the show. Anytime I think about Gensler now, I'm always pulling back. How is he going to get this back around? Almost, out of his control, out of the SEC's control by design. Like, the SEC seems to have lost this battle with the general public, with the folks on Capitol Hill, congressmen, senators drilling him. They're asking him, how did all this happen? How did FBX happen under your watch? By the way, it's not just some random company. This is your godson that you talk to, who is now responsible. So Gensler, like, he's going to be lucky if he does make it to Thanksgiving. But the fact that every time I think about him, I then go and I straight up Googled CFTC and Bitcoin, and this showing up on the CFTC website with no date, this random PDF, but that's the narrative. That is the story, that now it exists on a government website. It's not a law. It's not a regulation. It's just sort of entered into the AI database now for ChatGPT to pull from when I ask, is Bitcoin a commodity, right? Well, according to the CFTC website, that's how the narrative forms. And I think that's what we're going to see happen.
I think you're right. The timing of it too, right? None of this existed last week, right? And then what happens this week? Well, you say we're on a foot race straight to Thanksgiving, right? How much can we get done in the government in Q4? We all know Q4 is 3 months. We also all know in real life Q4 is from October 1 to Thanksgiving. Because what really happens between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I mean, that's when you tidy up all the nonsense. So when you think about the opportunity to educate and to start creating this new talking points, well, we got Donald Trump in court. We got Gensler in front of Congress. We got SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried in court. We are going to start
squeezed
to talk
in a
about
little Biden impeachment, just a little sprinkle.
Little Biden, little stuff like that. And then we're going to start pushing papers out saying, here's all the supporting documentation. Now, let's also, to be clear, you're about to have, in the SBF example, because this one's going to be a circus, right? For SBF, you have a number of his co-founder / business partners who have already been turned informant, or whatever the current word is for that, by the DOJ to come on the stand and testify against Sam Bankman-Fried, including the CTO, I want to say the other founding partner, but then there's this other character, this woman, who's very important. Her name is Caroline Ellison. Why is she important? She's the jilted lover, former girlfriend, we hear, who used to occupy a Bahamian mansion. I think it was in Nassau somewhere, right? And they were basically running, and the articles were about polyamorous tech
brothel
cults
in the Bahamas, baby.
They're brothel. They're eating Soylent Green. They're smoking crack. They're like moving funds. They're all the craziness, right? No one's taking showers. And then it comes out that Caroline Ellison is the head of Alameda Research, the company who is, quote, commingling the funds. And then it comes out that she's the goddaughter of Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC. And then it comes out that Sam Bankman-Fried was the student of Gary Gensler, as was Caroline Ellison at MIT in the Media Labs when they were working on the Franklin Project, the supposed central bank digital currency project. And you start to realize, oh my God,
what is going on?
And the last part of the circus, I think this is actually really a salient point, is the prosecution start bringing in customer one, customer two. So like in a Me Too trial, this would be Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, right? So in this type of financial trial, it's customer 1, customer 2. Who are these customers? Well, who knows? Maybe one's Tom Brady, right? He lost a bunch of money. Why not? He'd probably be one of them. Maybe it's Shaq. I don't know. But one of them, by their description, is a Ukrainian national who lost their life savings and who's supposedly very important. And you got to start to wonder, how is the SBF trial really going to just dovetail in to the entire Ukraine incursion story? Because remember, Sam Bankman-Fried donated lots of money to lots of senators on both sides of the aisle, and I guess maybe helped fund some important Ukrainian people of interest who now want their money back.
Do seem to recall that when the Ukrainian invasion occurred, it was at the height of the NFT hype and the crypto hype, and people had crypto in their MetaMask wallets, in hot wallets. People were moving, the markets were flying, and it was the ability to use this. Talk about back to a utility, back to a real world use case. We talked about it here on the show, but being able to in real time, not wait 7 days to move money from a bank being approved. I got an email from my bank that was like, your wire transfer has been accepted by the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. I'm like, what the? Really? Like, the Federal Reserve Bank had to look at my measly wire transfer like it was nothing. I could not believe, but it took 7 days. So yeah, I could see that narrative because it's a real world utility of how quickly the money could be transferred in Ethereum, in Bitcoin, in whatever FTT token they wanted to move it. It's in a smart contract. It moves from wallet to wallet. It cross border, quick and easy. I could see the narrative coming into play to say how the utility that it provides. But, you didn't mention SBF's parents. You got to keep them in the mix too. I heard some of this on the news tonight. They were talking about, were they his attorneys? Were they his de facto attorneys? Or were they his parents? Were they acting as his attorney? Or were they acting as his colleague in the arrangement? Like, it does feel like they botched the whole thing. Gensler was at the helm here with the whole MIT crew. And now it's like the only way to clean it up is to move it over to the CFTC and try it from this angle. We'll call it a commodity. We'll try again over here. We'll regulate it that way because these guys screwed up.
It feels a little bit like an MIT versus Stanford, Media Labs kind of battle, because remember, Bankman-Fried's parents are both Stanford a law professor and some other professor, and there's a lot of intrigue there. I don't know how much of it's FUD, but the intrigue was that his parents were employees of FTX. Like, he hired them
on the payroll
and gave him a salary, and apparently his father didn't like because his salary was so low. It was like $200K a year, and he wanted $1 million a year. But apparently old Sammy wouldn't do it. So then his father went to his mother and had his mother negotiate with the son or some nonsense. I mean, who knows how much of it's true, but the fact that there's all these weird there are X posts coming out about this very thing. And like you said, look, if Gensler is like, okay, this one went real sideways, and maybe it was a timing thing, or who knows? Maybe we can pin this on Ukraine. Remember when everyone had those QR codes or like send money to Ukraine to help these people? Maybe we can pin that on him too, and we can get his parents to go down as well. Because hey, I'm Gary, I'm SEC. This FTX stuff, that's somebody else's problem. I'm moving on to the CFTC. I'm moving on to the commodities.
Right.
I'm taking a new position. I'll go to Congress, but he's almost as. I mean, literally, Gary Gensler's name has not been mentioned one time by anyone during the Sam Bankman-Fried trial so far. And I don't know if it will be mentioned.
That does feel like to me, too. And I said this, the timing of this trial, I know it takes some time to prepare, but SBF, we know, was in jail and without a cell phone, apparently. And his lawyers had a hard time preparing him for it. That seems really fishy to me, because to me, you can't have, Carolyn Ellison take the stand in this trial that has massive implications for the BlackRock ETF, right? Like, think about it that way. If they got up there and were like, yep, all Bitcoin is bad, all crypto is bad, it's all like this, there's no way in hell that approval schedule for the BlackRock ETFs is going to continue to move forward if all of a sudden there's this like smoking gun of crypto being bad. Hence the narrative, and hence the focus in on the education of all the utilities. It's not that the technology is bad, it's that there's bad actors. I've heard that narrative coming out because the story, I mean, it's a bit conspiracy theory here, and I'll walk the line, but these guys have to have, all these witnesses have a very, very tight story. And the story that we hear, it might be salacious. We might be talking about polyamorous relationships in the Bahamas, but we won't be talking about how bad Bitcoin is. We won't be talking about how there can be backdoors written into smart contracts. We won't be talking about the bad actors who do rug pulls and rely on the anonymity to fraud people out of money. That won't be a part of the discussion, because those things need to be handled by the CFTC. That part of the equation is going to go over here. Things go where they belong. We got FTX out there now. This case will come to a resolution. I think you will likely see some sort of small jail time and settlement, and then he will rise from the ashes. We already know they're trying to reboot.
Well, they're going to reboot FTX, right? So like you said, it's not the technology. I think that what you're describing is very clear, and I like the succinctness of it, which is, this is now a story about the human. It was social hacking.
Yeah.
right? It was bad acting. The tech is great. You got to keep that narrative going. Otherwise, in the same week, Ethereum future products available in the United States.
Here we go.
I mean, it would seem like the kind of thing that would be like, it seems like the kind of thing that you'd want to just have fireworks. Like, you almost want to be able to go like this and have fireworks. Because
here we go,
wow,
ETF.
An ETF, we're ready to go. But but everyone doesn't know what it means, and it's not Bitcoin, it's ETH, and we're just going to announce
it's like
that
a trial. It's the beta test.
It's like a trial. It's its own trial while we have SBF on trial. So I think that it's really fascinating that Ethereum clearly isn't in the world view as the thing that matters. And maybe part of it too is just testing. When Bloomberg announces the same week as everyone's going to court and the same first week of the government, kicking off Q4, does it even make us? It's like throwing a little tiny rock pebble into a pond. It felt like they thought they were going to just splash that thing, but instead they tossed a pebble off the pier into the ocean and no one even noticed. So ETH as a future ready to go, great. So now we have to get through, like, that's ready to go. The order of events, we talked about, there's a cadence, right? ETH futures are ready to go. Perfect timing, right? We got to start raising money for these presidential candidates. They're going to be announcing around Thanksgiving. What else happens around Thanksgiving? Well, turns out we kicked the can down the road far enough, and McCarthy, if he's still around, will be able to renegotiate another new 45-day or future government shutdown aversion. So now when we talk about everything barreling towards Thanksgiving, and not just about Gary Gensler getting his turkey cooked, but like everything is barreling towards Thanksgiving, will the trial of SBF be wrapped by then? Because we know that Trump in court is supposed to go till the 22nd of December. Like, there's all these announcements which is weird. I never thought that they'd announce end dates of trials. Like, I always thought trials kind of went
before this date. Yeah.
I didn't know they announced it. I always thought that you kind of just did the trial until the discovery was done and the prosecution and the cross, blah, 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 and it ends at some point. But they're saying, like, hey, these things are time bound. Like, and I wonder what's SBF's trial end date, right?
How long is it going to go? Definitely before Thanksgiving.
Before Thanksgiving.
And I think we also needed to get rid of the strikes way before then. You called Thanksgiving. Those almost got ring-fenced and set aside way early. They had to come all the way back around to Yom Kippur to get those done early.
And to Q3, right?
Yeah,
Before Q4.
Let's set those aside. We'll get the deal. The AI stuff with the writers, we'll set that aside. The auto workers, we'll set that stuff aside because we got to get through this just litany of other cases and narratives and regulations and Bitcoin ETFs, all getting us to the start of 2024, new presidential election, new candidates, new banking system, new economy, firing on all cylinders. I think, this government shutdown is a short-term stopgap. It buys another 6 weeks. We talked about this, I remember, this time last year where we kept thinking something was happening and then it kind of got pushed back, like buying time. This feels like buying that other 6 weeks. And then we have to go back and look at the third and fourth and final deadlines for that Bitcoin ETF approval, because it already had the schedule built in. There was the first approval, then the second approval, then the third approval, all these deadlines. It kind of feels the same way with the government shutdown. It's like now there was this first deadline at September 30th. Now we're going to move the goalpost. We can always move the goalpost again, but we're going to try to get these timelines to line up. We need the budget approved. We need the regulation ready. We need the Bitcoin ETFs. We need Bankman-Fried out there as the bad guy. We got to get dumb money in market. Has anybody seen that movie yet? And here we go, rolling right into the holidays.
Yeah, and let's not forget that we have the IRS underneath all of that who came out and said, by the way, you're going to file your taxes for free at the IRS.gov's brand new, TurboTax killer. Sorry, Intuit, and the CEO who's
brought to you by
FedNow. Brought to you by FedNow, and your pal, is it Jenny Chang? Jesse Chang, who's been literally in every regulatory government position and is a crazy high-powered lawyer. And then you overlay that with this complete macro umbrella which said you do not have to tell us anything about crypto. all next year. Just let's pave the way not only for the government, but for every institution with money to just accumulate and do whatever you want.
Can I get one of these? Can I get one of these?
Do whatever you want.
2025.
Because we don't want to know until Jan 1, 2025, which will be after the election, which will be after all Sam Bankman-Fried goes to jail. It'll be after Gary Gensler has a new job. It'll be after whatever the new budget the government finally sets. It'll be after McCarthy gets replaced. It'll be after everyone changes out all their, their players.
New team.
All the subs go out. Guys, halftime, subs are going out. Get your oranges, get your water. Guess who's coming in? And there'll be a whole new cast of characters.
Speaking of football and changing the narrative, we don't talk about Taylor Swift enough on the podcast, but she is single-handedly driving the NFL narrative into the spotlight. Dating rumors, showing up at multiple games, driving ticket prices. I saw Kelsey jerseys, skyrocket sales 400%. Everybody's speculating about who's getting paid in the arrangement. Follow the money. Everybody is talking about it because
everyone's getting paid.
Everybody's getting paid. The NFL, I saw they had Kelsey's mom sitting next to the State Farm guy. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah. And then
this
she
is
went
a paid placement, people.
But that was the first game, because she was watching her other son play on the Eagles with the State Farm guy, Jake from State Farm. And then she got on a plane, I'm assuming a PJ, that's how they call it if you're a Swiftie, and they flew her to the stadium to watch Kelsey, and then she was in the booth with Taylor. And I'm going to say I do this because we're going to be talking about haptics and we're going to be talking about gestures and Vision Pro soon. But the scrubber for the football game, I use a YouTube TV, and the scrubber that lets you go back and forth in the time of the recording was no longer a circle dot, but it was 2-hand emoji making a heart, because that's Taylor's choice. And so apparently when you have a sponsor, again, where's the money coming from? Then they ask her and her people, hey, well, how do you want the scrubber
to change? What do you want it to be?
Because I had seen happy faces before. I'd seen a flag for like a country during World Cup. Like they play around with it, but it was a hearts for the Swifties. And you said, the data that I just heard was since Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift started dating, quote unquote, or whenever people started speculating.
Paying each other.
He has gained 900,000 new Instagram followers, and his jersey sales have gone up. But then not only that, they're now selling Kelsey 87 jerseys that don't say Kelsey on the back. It says Swiftie. I'm not kidding. And apparently they're flying off the shelf. And they're tokenized.
It is wild to think what is really happening here, because when you're describing watching that game on YouTube and this kind of personalized experience that's bringing this kind of real world element of pop culture into the viewing screen, the thing that popped for me this weekend was the partnership between NFL and Pixar, where they were running one of these NFL games as a live simulcast broadcast in Andy's room with all of the players as Toy Story characters. So they're using the new 8K motion cap cameras, likely brought to you by Apple and their friend over at Disney, aka part of Pixar, right? To film the game in real time and use the motion of the players to then map it to a Mr. Potato Head or to a Buzz Lightyear character. And I'm telling you, even like the halftime show, they're bringing in the characters. It's live. When somebody scores, when Kelsey scores on live television, my son could be watching it in Andy's room in the metaverse, seeing it how he, quote unquote, wants to see it. We've talked about these things. When we start to bring in this concept of extended reality, we talk about Apple, we talk about all the advancements in the technology. Where could all of that lead to? Well, I mean, any number of things. If I go to the toy store and I buy, a specific Toy Story character and I scan the QR code, now when my kid watches the NFL game, they're not just seeing some random toy, they're seeing the one that's in their room, the one they bought, the character matches, the voice could match. The Pokemon card that comes with it that matches. Is that a tokenized security? Well, I don't know, Mr. Gensler. Please answer the question. And that's how I'm tying NFL, Taylor Swift, YouTube changing UX, Pixar, Toy Story in the room to this is all going to be facilitated with real-time payment system. So when I want to buy that Swiftie jersey, I'm just going to give them the old thumbs up right there in my extended reality. That camera's going to see, Michael, do you want to buy that jersey? Yes, I do. What would you like to say on the back of it? I'd like it to say Swiftie in green, please. Yep, that will arrive on Tuesday. Would you like to use Apple Pay? Give me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Boom, done.
That's right. And now if we want to try to parlay that into, I think what's also, you're talking about blending these new entertainment formats to the point to where they become indiscernible from one another, right? And we start going to things like Vision Pros and wearables where the screen and the experience isn't fixed on some wall on a big black Samsung panel, but it's something that's very interactive. I replay or rewind back to when Nickelodeon started doing deals with the NFL, where you can have like the kids version of when the real-time game happens, you hit the end zone, the slime explodes, and they do their special effects. We talk about, this NFL partnership with Pixar. Now I'm realizing, well, let's talk about Xbox. Let's talk about PlayStation, because maybe that becomes the way
the wallet integration.
More gamers get turned onto real sports. Like, hey, we've seen that you've played this many hours of FIFA, Madden, MLB Show, or whatever. Now, hey, instead of playing right now, there is a game on. Do you want to pause your video game and then do a picture-in-picture or slide over to the actual broadcast? Or do you want us to just take over the game with the broadcast and have your characters replace the real players?
You want to play in the game? You want in? Put me in, coach.
You want to have Michael Jordan and the Bulls playing in place of Kevin Rose against LeBron? Well, we could do that because we know you're playing the 2K version and we're just going to do that integration. So suddenly it's like the format of the entertainment ceases to matter. And I'm starting to realize with this Xbox wallet leak, like, look, let's bring it back around to actual transactions, right? What happened? Well, it turns out, I mean, surprise, surprise, but Microsoft, who owns Xbox, there's a leak that there's going to be a digital wallet associated with your Xbox Live account. And should that be some surprise? Because we also saw that Microsoft, Google, all these guys are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in all these new projects. Literally, Google and Microsoft teamed up. When does that happen? This article hit. They invested $150 million into a new AI firm called AlphaSense together. So we talked about who are the incumbents, who owns your path to the metaverse. I always talk about Apple. I'm not going to say we. I always talk about Apple, right? They know your face, they know your eyes, they got your access. We know that Meta likes to think that with the Quest and all that, they're going to have a hardware answer too. I don't think that's going to be that interesting, but they have one. So who else is out there? Well, Google, Microsoft, these others, they know we got to team up. If we're going to take on Apple, we need to pull ourselves together and come at them. And Microsoft knows we got Xbox. We have a console that's still in people's houses. Baby. That's hardware, right? And that does have a camera. The Xbox Live camera is a thing that's been around for more than a decade.
Right, tracking.
Always scanning your room and tracking you. So it's not like they're any strangers to figuring out your physical space and creating some version of a metaverse. But again, like you said, the only way to make people understand is to teach. And I feel like right now, the combination of the most important pop star in the world, ostensibly, partnering with the most important football team in the world, in one of the largest sports franchises, partnering with hardware guys and AR guys, all these people, you're starting to see that the metaverse actually is maybe something that we're going to be in even before we go buy things like Vision Pros and Quest 3s. We're just going to be in it without the wearables. That's going to be the big aha everyone has.
Yeah, and Taylor Swift is going to be playing at the halftime show in my metaverse for sure. I'm going to leave it there. Any final thoughts?
I mean, look, I found out that Usher is going to be dancing at the halftime show, but I would put a $2 bill bet on the fact that Taylor Swift comes out for just one little performance with him or some little serenade, because especially if the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, I mean, come on, how could she not?
Oh, my goodness.
It's going to be awesome.
Well, let's enjoy our entrance into October. We'll do it again next week.
Great talking to you.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join us next week for more news on all things Web3. Check, please.